How are you folks? Dave Brown here with the New Populist. Thank you again for joining me. So we have this Ukraine conflict that has dragged on now for almost 16 months, 17 months, and day by day there aren't too many big changes. We've had this Ukrainian offensive now for 30 days. It's essentially spun its wheels. Ukraine might gain, half a kilometer here and there, but it's not significant, and it's in the gray area before the Russian main line. So it's insignificant, other than the obviously tragic loss of life. So for that reason, I don't like to cover the Ukraine conflict every day. There's no point. But there are two things that are going on right now that I think are worth covering. The first I've talked about before, and that is the issue of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Now, I did a video about a week and a half ago covering the press conference of Lindsey Graham, a Republican senator, and Richard Blumenthal, a Democrat. And both of these guys are steaming turds. And if they're working together, that's usually bad news for the American people. Now, this press conference was on June 22nd, and they spoke about introducing a resolution that said if Russia uses tactical nukes or causes some sort of nuclear catastrophe like blowing up a power plant, this would trigger Article 5 of the NATO treaty. Now, here's the exact wording from the resolution. Views the use of any tactical nuclear weapon by the Russian Federation, the Republic of Belarus or their proxies, or the destruction of a nuclear facility, dispersing radioactive contaminants into NATO territory, causing significant harm to human life as an attack on NATO, requiring an immediate response, including the implementation of Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. Now, I knew this wasn't going to happen anytime soon. And why is this? Well, this press conference was on the 22nd. And the resolution, as of today, July 6th, has still not been presented in the U.S. Senate. So that's 2 weeks, right? So if they proposed this, or if they talked about this resolution, but they weren't planning on voting on it for a couple of weeks, that tells me that the attack on the power plant wasn't coming soon. So predictably, it was just recently, I think the 4th or the 5th, where Zelensky says that Russia might attack the nuclear power plant that they are inhabiting themselves, and that there were objects on the roof of the power plant. Now, international officials said they saw no evidence of it, with the caveat that they didn't have full access. But again, I find it interesting that it's now that Zelensky says it right before the Senate goes back into session and Graham and Blumenthal can propose this resolution for the Senate to vote on concerning a potential nuclear strike or a nuclear disaster. So the timing there I find very suspicious. It's almost like Graham and Blumenthal knew the attack wouldn't happen within a week of that press conference on the 22nd. A little suspicious there. Now, what's funny too is that CNN actually reported on this, and they said something that was surprisingly accurate and kind of goes against the narrative. And they asked in this article on CNN.com, would a nuclear incident benefit Russia? And they say it is unclear how Russia would benefit from causing an explosion at the plant. The winds are blowing east, so it's going to affect Russians. In terms of military effectiveness, zero. It's just stupid. Albuquerque said any nuclear incident would just be self-harm. It would just harm Russian-held territory. I don't get the play. As well as not providing clear military strategic gains for Russia, causing a nuclear incident might backfire diplomatically. So as I said before, Putin does not want to spook China or India, Iran, any of his partners. He needs things to be relatively stable. He can't escalate in a way that's going to cause the situation to just evolve into complete chaos. He needs his allies, his friends to trust him and to think that he has a control on the situation. So there's absolutely zero reason for Russia to want to cause a nuclear incident in Ukraine. So that begs the question, why is Zelensky and the West trying to plant this idea and why are they trying to blame Russia for a potential incident? Who would fall for it? Well, we have Nord Stream. They blamed the Russians for months and months and months, and then they said, okay, sorry, it's not the Russians. They have the dam. I think the Ukrainians did it, but they blamed the Russians despite the fact they hurt the Russians more than it hurt the Ukrainians. So they have a track record of blaming Russia, and unfortunately, there's enough people out there in the confusion who will believe what the media, what the government says. So an incident happens at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. They blame Russia. And by the time they figure out that maybe it wasn't Russia, it's been 6 or 12 months. And what they wanted, which is NATO intervention, has already happened. And going back and relitigating what happened exactly at the power plant will be just something that most people won't even pay attention to. Just think about it. The origins of COVID, they said for a year and a half, it was natural. Now it's probably the lab. But by the time they go back and admit it, it's been too long and the public has moved on. So that's why they lie, because they can get away with it. And it's a pattern. It happens, it's been happening for years. And the American public just doesn't catch on, or doesn't want to catch on, or is too distracted to catch on. And the last thing I'll say about this, the location of these explosives on the roof. Other commentators have mentioned that's really convenient, that Russia would blow up the plant from the roof, where a HIMAR or another sort of, what are those missiles called from the UK? I forgot what they're called, the Shadow something. That's where they would hit at if Ukraine were to launch them at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. So how convenient that Russia would place these explosives on the top where those missiles could hit, and obviously cover for Ukraine. And they could say, oh, we told you about these bombs that were there. It's so stupid and so transparent. And again, why do people believe it? It's nonsense, but here we are, and this is what we're dealing with. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, Prigozhin, my favorite guy. So people were saying that as a result of this failed mutiny, that Putin was stronger and that Russia was in a stronger position. And of course, if the people on the pro-Ukraine side, the NATO side, they said, "Oh, this is evidence that Putin is on the rocks and the Putin regime is shaky." And I took a different stance on it. I kind of went up the middle here. I said there's some pros and there's some cons, and sometimes an action doesn't have any clear winner, right? And that if you get lemons, you make lemonade, and that's what Putin's going to do. But I made the point that if Putin had allowed Prigozhin to get as far as he did, it was because Prigozhin did have some political power. And that was something that was weighing on the mind of Putin and why he let him get this far. And so people were saying, well, now he's in Belarus and he's on house arrest. He's done. Putin's stronger. I'm like, nah, I don't know about that. This guy is he's a wild card, and people do like him. So we get this report today that Prigozhin is back in St. Petersburg, according to Lukashenko, the president of Belarus. So what does that mean for people who said that Prigozhin was going to be stuck in Belarus on house arrest and he was done? Why is he in St. Petersburg? Why is the GRU or whatever the name is, of the Russian security forces. Why are they raiding his house, finding money and weapons? Something weird is going on here. I don't know what it is, but I'll make the argument that this is not a good look for Putin. You can't spin this as something that's good. This is proof that Putin has his issues. Prigozhin has his political power, and there's no way to spin it here. This is not a good thing, and they need to get this under control, because the international perception is just as important as the reality. If people think that there's a split in the Russian leadership, that's not good. That's not good for Russia's partners, and this will only encourage the knuckleheads at NATO, United States, England, to press harder, especially with this NATO summit coming up, where they're of course going to want to press on to give more weapons, more support, especially if they think that Putin is weak and there's cracks, as Anthony Blinken described it, cracks in his government. So not a good thing. You can't spin it as Putin's stronger, he's more in control now because he took care of this problem. No, it's still a problem. It's unclear what's going on here, and that's not good for Putin and his government. So they need to sort this guy out. You think by now they would have put a couple of bullets in his head, throw him off a building, but they haven't. So it's going to be interesting when this conflict's over and we get the real story of Prigozhin. It's going to be really interesting to see exactly what was going on behind the scenes. It's not a prediction. Maybe it is exactly what it shows to be here, just a knucklehead and a guy who's not completely under control. But there might be more moving parts here that we're unaware of that will come out in time. So we'll just have to keep an eye out in the future to see what comes out later. So that's it for now. If you're new to my channel, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.